Operation Tomodachi, literally translated from Japanese into English, Operation Friends, was an effort by U.S. armed forces to provide humanitarian assistance by supporting Japan in disaster relief beginning on March 12, 2011. It involved 24,000 U.S. service members, 189 aircraft, 24 naval ships, and an estimated $90 million. You didn't see other governments coming to the aid like the U.S., excluding the $4.3 billion costs incurred by the construction of the USS Ronald Reagan that's now been radiated. And here's the headline. You've got to go to RT to even know about this. It's up on Infowars.com. U.S. Navy sailors sue Japan for lying about Fukushima radiation. And it has now come out that they were testing them, and as the levels went up, they stopped the testing. And, of course, this has come out in the Japanese news that they lied to the whole world and would just say that detectors weren't working in Fukushima prefecture or that state and surrounding areas. And now they've been doing the same thing here in the United States with increased radiation levels. We sent our reporters out for a week on the West Coast, finding as high as 14 times and 10 times and 7 times and 9 times, all up and down the southern, central, and northern coast of California and Oregon. That is big news. And the news admitted we were right, but said, you know, it was still a conspiracy theory to think it was bad. So the radiation's up, but they're not going to discuss why. And a lot of it's toxic waste dumping over the years. The Navy did, and it's Fukushima. In fact, will you guys print me this? It was a study out, marine biologists last week, that the seals are dying on the West Coast in Alaska from the radiation. And they've been testing them because it bioaccumulates the fish they eat. It builds up. This is a very, very serious situation. Here it is. University of Alaska scientists, Fukushima radiation may be making Alaskan seals sick with huge bloody rot holes in them and radiation sickness evidence. So we're like seals, folks. Things bioaccumulate in us. We're at the top of the food chain. And we're joined until the bottom of the hour by Attorney Paul Garner and Lieutenant Steve Simmons, who was out on one of those ships that gave aid when everybody else ran. And so they can also break down what he saw, what unfolded. But this is a big deal because just like the deadly dust on 9/11, which we know they knew about, they lied and said it was safe to breathe. I know a lot of firefighters and police I've spoken with in New York it benefits for who are now dead. And it took them 9 years to finally get some coverage, medical coverage. This is how evil the government is. The New York Post called them ambulance chasers. I mean, I've been there when the cops and firemen are literally coughing blood up and are on oxygen machines and can't even go on stage turning blue. And then they die. And they're, oh, well, we only say cops and firemen are heroes when the government wants to use them for some event, or Navy sailors or Marines or Army. But when it comes to actually backing them up, we call them ambulance chasers. So we're joined by Paul Garner, the attorney, and Lieutenant Steve Simmons from the Navy. Gentlemen, you've got the floor. Tell us what you witnessed when you were there, Lieutenant Simmons, and what's unfolded now and what's happened to the 71, at least 71 sailors, many of them in their 20s, reporting radiation sickness, filing suit against Tokyo Electric. Tell us what's going on.
Well, first, thank you for having me on the show. You know, it's tragic, actually, of what's been going on with everybody who's now suffering.
Is this Steve? Is this Steve or is this Paul?
This is Steve.
Okay, so this is the Navy man. Okay, go ahead, sir.
Paul, this is Paul, and I'm sorry to interrupt Steve and your question, but I just want to say to you, Alex Jones, that you are a true Tomodachi to our first responders and all 70,000 participants in Operation Tomodachi. Thank you for bringing awareness to this situation to your listeners. I hope it stays on the front burner. Go on, Steve. I just want to add something. I listened to what you said before. You might want to check out a paper that was written almost a year ago, came out of Honolulu, Hawaii, University of Hawaii, Evaluation of Radiation Doses and Associated Risk from the Fukushima nuclear accident to marine biota and human consumers of seafood. And this is by Nicholas Fisher, Browleen Seiler. I'll send you the link. But this is of grave concern and should be to every inhabitant.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's why we've got you on, and I'm no hero doing this. You're just doing your duty as well. If they don't care about sailors, Counselor, they don't care about anybody. I mean, we've got to start worrying about these reactors.
Yeah, and Alex, for God's sakes, send the ambulance at least, and we'll chase after the ambulance, you know what I mean? But they didn't even send the ambulance to help these poor people, these victims, and instead, the DOD just canceled the Tomodachi registry. It'll be a year this February 1st that they decide to throw in the towel on that, claiming that it's all low dose, and I'll speak with you further about that later, but I really want you to hear from Steve, okay?
Absolutely. Tell us what you witnessed, what you did in the operation trying to help the Japanese.
Well, you know, everybody's job was different as far as who did what, who worked where. You know, my position while I was out there, I was actually an administrative officer for the air wing, the carrier air wing that was embarked on the Reagan for that particular deployment. So it was a scheduled deployment. We were already out on deployment, and we were actually heading to participate in an exercise, and we actually got diverted from the exercise, got diverted up north to go participate and, of course, help out the citizens of Japan following that 9.0 earthquake and tsunami that ravaged their shore. So
you were there super early. How long after Fukushima reactors blew up a few days into it, were you on site?
The earthquake and tsunami hit if I remember correctly, on the 11th of March, and if I remember right, we arrived on the 12th of March.
Wow, and because the reactors didn't go right away. That is simply amazing.
5 hours. Forgive me for interrupting, but former Prime Minister Naoto Kan revealed to the Japanese Foreign Press Corps that the meltdown of reactor number 1 occurred 5 hours after the earthquake. He measured it from the earthquake at 2:46 p.m. local time.
Yes.
And the tsunami happened about 45 minutes later. But they knew that they were in a loca. They knew that they had loss of coolant. They knew that they were heading to a meltdown, and they had a meltdown 5 hours later before these first responders showed on the scene.
And then it kept going on for days, and then the big Mach 3 blew up. That was the one that shot the mushroom cloud in the air so far. Amazing.
Yeah, and they were cooked for 5 hours in what is claimed by those in charge as being low dose, and you can get as much by eating a banana or from just taking a plane ride or something.
That's right. Tell us the long and short of it. I mean, you guys, these sailors, everybody tried to help with Fukushima. You got radiated, and the big crux here, as I was reading the news, is that then your radiation levels were going up, so they stopped testing you. Tell folks what happened.
Well, the story that they've been peddling, or that's been peddled for the past 3 years, is that there is no threat to the radiation levels that anybody was exposed to, and that you can actually get more radiation exposure from 1 month's worth of rock, sun, and soil, or a transcontinental flight. So that now today, it doesn't sit well. I can say, at least for me, it doesn't sit well. It's not that easy to push that I believe button because of some of the measures that were taken while the ship was out there.
Sure. I mean, well, they admit this is much worse than Chernobyl, and it's ongoing. So what did you do in the mission? How close did you get? And then when did you guys start to feel sick?
Well, if I remember correctly, I wasn't, my job, I'm not a navigator or anything like that. All I can go is, what we were told. So at one point we were within pretty close proximity to the plant, and as Paul mentioned, sitting for 5 hours, we actually sailed into the nuclear plume and was in the plume for a little over 5 hours. And then on a subsequent time, we actually had to secure the water system, because we actually sucked up the contaminants into the water system of the ship. And everybody who knows something about the ship, that's how we get our drinkable water, our potable water. So everything we use, from showers, water faucets, soda machines, water for cooking, it's all coming from seawater.
And what is the point in your missions of sailing through the plume?
That's a very valid question. That's definitely a question that I don't have an answer to. I'm not...
Sure. And so you guys are saying you've got radiation sickness. When did you start to see the symptoms?
Well, it was November of 2011 after I had returned. Apparently I was having some issues on the ship, and I really didn't think much about it as far as GI-type issues, and I didn't really think anything about it. November of 2011, I started feeling ill, at which time I was actually driving into Arlington, heading to work. I was driving down Route 50, and I actually blacked out and drove my truck up on a curb. So after that, it was back and forth to the doctor, test after test, couldn't figure anything out. Started running fevers. I was running fevers for 3 months solid, as high as 102.9, in and out of the hospital 3 different times for admittance into the hospital. Lymph nodes start swelling, dealing with severe night sweats, lost 20 to 25 pounds completely unexpectedly, wiping hair off my body as I showered. And then during the second hospitalization, I was actually standing up and my legs just buckled. And then from there it started dealing with muscle weakness, progressing up, and now it's taken a point where it now affects the signals between the brain and the bladder, and I have to catheterize every 4 hours now.
Good Lord. Classic radiation.
Wheelchair dependent.
Classic radiation sickness symptoms. And, of course, Japanese children are dropping dead everywhere. People are having heart failure. Their teeth are falling out. Same type stuff you've been going through with the bleeding and the not having control of the bladder. And, of course, the response is that nothing's going on, correct?
As of right now, there's been no doctors able to, well, I don't want to say able to, but at least willing to make the connection. In fact, I've actually had, the first time I was hospitalized, I actually brought it up to the intern, and the intern's response to me was, well, if this was radiation, you would have seen symptoms long before this. My response back to him was, I'm no doctor, but you need to go back to med school because you're an idiot.
Well, let's talk to your lawyer, Paul Garner, real quick. I do see that Congress, the Navy Times is reporting, is investigating sailors' exposure to Fukushima radiation. But, I mean, my whole point is anybody in the military, or the police for that matter, should understand that when stuff melts down, out of hand, almost every time, they deny people were exposed, just like the nerve gas in the first Gulf War. 24,000 chemical detectors went off, and they still just said, no, nothing happened, even though it killed large numbers of people years later, and has now been confirmed. Talking to your attorney, Paul Garner, why do you think they have this attitude? I mean, clearly your client and others on the ship and ships are showing classic forms of radiation sickness. What's been the train of events the last 3 years?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
They control the ball game. They control the media. They control the misinformation that's disseminated from day one, from Fukushima Gate. If you were at the nuclear power plant on day one, March 11th, 2011, and you were in charge of the power plants and having to deal with the meltdown of reactor number 1, number 2, number 3, and the potential to have to say, hey, we have to walk away from this because you'll have to evacuate Tokyo, Japan. So here's the dynamic. The guy who was in charge is now dead from cancer, their own guy. So I don't care what Nuke Abe, their present prime minister, may be pushing to the world. No one has gotten sick from Fukushima, and no one ever will. Well, just take a look at the guy who was in charge of, your TEPCO, your Tokyo Electric Power Company. You're a big shareholder. You're number one shareholder in it now. The guy's dead from cancer. Hello? So they're